Over the past year, the Lakers have hired a guy he co-hosted a podcast with. They also drafted LeBron James, and then all made statements like Bronny had earned the right to be a second-round pick when that's not even close to accurate.
Not possible.
Then they played Bronny the first game of the season. And throughout times in the NBA season, while giving him a guaranteed 4-year contract, despite the fact he was like, the 55th pick in the NBA draft? The whole thing is a massive contradiction and a statement of being ungrateful.
For years, LeBron has been celebrated for his elite basketball IQ, leadership, and ability to elevate everyone around him. That has been the narrative for more than a decade. The floor general, the culture setter, the player who makes teammates better simply by being on the court. His presence has consistently been framed as transformational. But Doug Gottlieb flips that narrative on its head. He argues that behind the brilliance is a recurring pattern, one where LeBron's preferences don't just influence organizations, but quietly shape them. From roster construction to coaching decisions to long-term strategy, the suggestion isn't merely influence, it's control. Now, under the intense spotlight of the Los Angeles Lakers, that scrutiny feels heavier than ever. The uncomfortable question critics continue to ask is straightforward. Did the Lakers give LeBron everything he wanted, only to face public pressure and visible frustration in return? The influence debate is where things truly heat up. The Lakers hired a head coach with whom LeBron shared strong podcast chemistry, JJ Redick. They drafted his son, Bronny James. They repeatedly reshaped the roster to align with his championship window. Each move can be defended individually, but taken together, critics argue, they paint a picture of a franchise orbiting around one superstar's timeline. Supporters would say that's simply what teams do when they have a generational player. They maximize the window. Critics see something different, a pattern where long-term
Have to match up your actions with your words.
Facts.
If LeBron wants to win a championship, well then, why would you opt into a deal that pays you $53 million?
Real talk.
Because here's how it really works. If you want to win, you know you got to take less so that you can pay more to go out and get guys on the free agent market. And if you want to guarantee yourself a big fat paycheck, what you can do is you can backload a contract, do it as a player-only option, and you play a year with the Lakers. And oh yeah, by the way, if it doesn't work out, you want to retire, you had them buy their way out of an opt-out or whatever, or you go somewhere next year.
According to Doug Gottlieb, none of this is random. In his view, it reflects a franchise orbiting around one superstar rather than building in the traditional, long-term way. The organization adjusted, reshaped, and aligned itself with one central figure. But when those moves didn't immediately translate into multiple championships, the atmosphere began to shift. The gratitude narrative cooled. The pressure intensified. The tone surrounding the team changed. Beneath the surface, the real tension isn't just about wins and losses. It's about expectations versus results. When so much is invested in maximizing one player's window, the return is expected to be undeniable. That's where the true debate begins. Is this simply the cost of having an all-time great in your building, or does it suggest that even legends can tilt the balance too far when their influence grows too strong? At the center of this storm is LeBron's longtime agent, Rich Paul, and his agency, Clutch Sports Group. That partnership goes beyond standard player representation. Critics argue it represents influence operating at
LeBron met, I think, selling jerseys out of the back of his car, right? So he's part of, started from the bottom, now we're here.
Together, LeBron and his longtime agent Rich Paul have negotiated massive contracts, influenced roster direction, and helped redefine how modern superstars apply pressure to front offices. This goes beyond a typical player-agent relationship. To critics, it represents power politics operating at the highest levels of the NBA. Doug Gottlieb sharpens his argument at this point. He says power cuts both ways. When public statements emphasize the desire to compete for championships at the highest level, while at the same time securing a contract worth over $50 million per year, league executives take notice. In a hard salary cap system, every dollar matters. Each contract directly affects what a team can and cannot build around its star. Gottlieb's stance is straightforward. If winning is truly the top priority, sacrifices often follow. That might mean taking less money, freeing up cap space, and giving management more flexibility to add key pieces. Some past legends followed that blueprint while chasing titles. So when LeBron opts into his full salary and the roster struggles to land elite upgrades, critics see a disconnect between the message and the move. Of course, whether it's fair to expect a player of his stature to leave money on the table is open for debate. Superstars earn what the market allows. But in the NBA, optics...
Hey, you're appreciative of Jeannie and Rob Pelinka. Your actions are far different.
Yup.
Because if you're really appreciative, why would you release a statement? If you really want to win a championship, why'd you release a statement? How it lands on me is poorly because it feels like the Lakers, and LeBron has talked about it, and he always couches it with the, I understand, now we're building around Luka. This is LeBron James and Rich Paul pouting and trying to exert some sort of leverage that doesn't actually exist. This is no different than LeBron when he was leaving Cleveland the second time, leaking out there that could be interested in the San Antonio Spurs, who had no interest in LeBron James.
Wasn't happening.
Because you can say, hey, we're really appreciative, but the reality is...
Suddenly, the Lakers weren't simply chasing upgrades. They were maneuvering around financial and roster constraints. Every move required careful navigation. Critics argue these weren't isolated gambles, but part of a clear win-now philosophy closely aligned with LeBron's championship window. It created a cycle of constant adjustments, constant urgency, and constant pressure. According to Doug Gottlieb and others, there were alternative paths the franchise could have taken. At different points, players like DeMar DeRozan were reportedly within reach, options that might have meant different contracts, different chemistry, and different long-term flexibility. Those roads weren't taken, and that's where the debate intensifies. The tension, then, isn't just about one contract or one trade. It's about the broader question of influence. How much is too much? When a franchise fully commits to maximizing a superstar's timeline, the short-term payoff can be enormous. In this case, it produced a championship, but the long-term squeeze that follows can be equally significant. That's the balance at the heart of the discussion, whether the aggressive pursuit of immediate success
just the past year alone, we'll make it 13 months a year. Is that okay? Over the past year, the Lakers have hired a guy he co-hosted a podcast with as the head coach of the Lakers. And look, I get it. Like, I'm not that different from the JJ Redick hire. Okay? But it's the head coach of the Lakers, and they hired him. Okay. They also drafted Bronny James, and then all made statements like Bronny had earned the right to be a second-round pick when that's not even close to accurate.
Not possible.
Then they played Bronny the first game of the season. And throughout times in the NBA season, while giving him a guaranteed 4-year contract, despite the fact he was like, the 55th pick in the NBA draft? So the worst thing they did, and then if you predate that, they went out and got Anthony Davis. They overpaid for Anthony Davis. Why? He was a Rich Paul client. And when they struck out the first time around, they went back in the offseason and went after him and got him. Overpaid for him. Remember, they got Russell Westbrook on the LA Lakers. Why? They were going to get DeMar DeRozan. That was the guy. Well documented. DeMar DeRozan was going to be the third guy. But what happened was LeBron was like, nah, we like Russell Westbrook.
Different roster combinations might have created better balance, more shooting, more depth, and greater long-term stability. But when the organization leaned heavily into LeBron's preferences and the results didn't turn into sustained dominance, the hard question surfaced quickly. Who owns it? Is it the front office for signing off on every move, or the superstar whose voice carried the most weight? That's where leadership gets examined under a microscope.
LeBron has long been praised as the ultimate teammate elevator, the floor general who raises everyone's level. Doug Gottlieb frames it differently. He presents LeBron as selfless between the lines, yet highly strategic off the court. Calculated, leveraged, always protecting future options. That's not necessarily a character attack, it's a question of priorities. When nearly every major move appears connected to personal influence, perception begins to shift. It stops looking purely like leadership and starts looking like control management. Meanwhile, inside the organization, a quiet power shift seems underway. The Lakers front office, led by Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka, has increasingly signaled a future that stretches beyond LeBron's timeline. There's more emphasis on younger pieces, long-term cap flexibility, and strategic patience instead of aggressive, panic-driven swings. For the first time in years, it doesn't feel automatic that every request will be accommodated. And when a franchise begins planning for life after its biggest star, tension is unavoidable. That isn't drama, it's transition. Zoom out further, and the league itself is changing. Teams are doubling down on youth, continuity, and internal development, rather than star-driven quick fixes. The era of full superstar control doesn't feel as dominant as it once did. For someone like LeBron, who mastered leverage throughout his career, even a slight reduction in influence changes the equation. Some critics connect this moment to a broader career pattern. His exits from Miami and Cleveland reshaped those franchises overnight. He always had the power to pivot, to reset the board, but this chapter feels different. Age matters, contract structures matter, the league's direction matters. Dictating outcomes isn't as simple as it used to be. Gottlieb's angle is sharp. He suggests the visible frustration isn't just about the Lakers struggling, it's about leverage. In his view, LeBron's control isn't what it once was, and that reality hits differently after 2 decades of steering the wheel. Then there's the Bronny factor, easily the most emotional layer of the debate. Drafting Bronny James created a historic father-son storyline filled with pride, legacy, and pressure. But critics argue it also complicated things for the franchise. Development timelines, media attention, and competitive balance all became intertwined.